"Your daughter is alive!" The parrot's shrill cry, coming from the darkest corner of the mansion, made the magnate's heart stop. He looked at the dusty portrait of little Maria, a look of pain that never faded. But how? His wife had sworn the girl was lost forever. With each word repeated by the bird, the cold, cruel reality crashed down on him, revealing a dark secret his own wife had buried. What did the parrot know, and what would he do with this truth that threatened to shatter his life into 1,000 pieces? A shiver ran down the magnate's spine. His gaze, previously fixed on Maria's faded portrait, now pierced the parrot, which seemed to observe him with almost human intelligence. "Alive?" the magnate murmured, his voice hoarse. The word echoed in his mind, a dangerous whisper that threatened to destabilize years of mourning. He approached the cage, his steps hesitant, as if he feared the bird would disappear, taking with it that spark of unbearable hope. The parrot, a vibrant feathered macaw, tilted its head. "Maria is alive. Bad mommy," it repeated, with a clarity that chilled the magnate's blood. "Bad mommy." The phrase was a sharp dagger. His wife Helena, always so dedicated, so suffering, how could she be the bad mommy? A wave of nausea hit him. Could it be that the parrot, with its prodigious memory, was revealing something he, in his blind grief, had never perceived? The doubt was unbearable. The magnate sat down heavily, his hands trembling. Memories of the fateful day, when Maria disappeared from the garden, returned with overwhelming force. Helena was inconsolable, swearing the girl had gotten lost in the forest. He had believed her, every tear, every embrace. But now the parrot's words planted a seed of doubt, as bitter as poison in his soul. The image of his daughter, with golden curls and crystalline laughter, flooded his mind. He had lost her, or so he thought. The idea that she could be alive somewhere and that his own wife was involved in her disappearance was a blow he could barely endure. But his overwhelming love for Maria was stronger than any fear. Helena entered the room, her usual smile, but a calculating glint in her eyes. "Darling, are you all right? You look pale," she said, her voice soft. The magnate felt a shiver. He looked at her, trying to decipher what lay behind that perfect facade. For an instant, the image of the parrot's bad mommy superimposed itself on his wife. He swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile. "Just tired, Helena. I had a terrible nightmare." The parrot, as if to contradict the magnate's lie, let out a loud screech. "Secret! Secret!" Helena turned sharply to the bird, a shadow of irritation crossing her face. "That noisy bird. We should get rid of it, darling. It gets on my nerves." The suggestion sounded like a veiled threat. The magnate felt his heart pound. No, he would not get rid of the parrot. He needed it. He needed the truth. In that instant, a cold, unshakable resolve formed in the magnate's chest. No matter how painful the truth, or how monstrous the betrayal, he would find out. For Maria, he would unravel every lie, every secret, his silent grief transformed into burning determination. He looked at Helena, who was now walking away, and then at the parrot, which watched him in silence. The hunt for the truth had begun, and the magnate knew there would be no turning back. The hunt for the truth had begun, and the magnate knew there would be no turning back. That night sleep did not come. He tossed and turned in bed, his mind in a whirlwind. The image of Maria, Helena's laughter, the parrot's words, everything mingled in a waking nightmare. How could he investigate his own wife, the woman with whom he shared his life, without raising suspicion? The mansion, once a sanctuary of luxury and comfort, now seemed like a golden cage, with secrets whispered in every corner. The next day, the magnate acted with a calculated calm, a mask of normalcy that barely concealed the storm within him. He observed Helena during breakfast, every movement, every expression. She seemed the perfect wife, attentive, smiling as she spoke of plans for the week. But he noticed a different glint in her eyes when the parrot, still in the living room, let out a muffled, "Secret, secret." An almost imperceptible tremor ran through Helena's body, and her smile faltered for an instant. That was enough to fuel the flame of suspicion. The magnate's first step was discreet. He began to review old documents, dusty boxes in the attic that held memories of Maria's childhood. He searched for something, anything, that might have gone unnoticed at the time of the disappearance. Photos, diaries, letters. Each item was examined with a magnifying glass of pain and hope. With each photograph of Maria, his heart ached, a mix of longing and the new, terrible hope. He remembered the pure joy his daughter brought, the way she lit up the family's life. The idea that this light might have been extinguished, or worse, hidden by Helena, was an almost unbearable burden. He also began to pay more attention to the parrot. Discreetly, when Helena wasn't around, he approached the cage. "Maria. Where is Maria?" he whispered, his heart pounding. The bird, as if understanding the urgency in his voice, shook its head and repeated disconnected phrases, but one of them stuck in the magnate's mind. "Cabin. Far away. Bad mommy. Cabin. Far away." The words were like breadcrumbs in a dark forest, guiding him to a truth he feared to find. Each day, the tension grew in the mansion. Helena, with her sharp perceptiveness, noticed the change in her husband, although he tried hard to hide it. Her gazes became longer, more penetrating. She tried to approach him with questions about his well-being, but the magnate felt the weight of her words, as if testing his facade. He knew he needed to be more cautious, more subtle. Helena's web of lies was complex, and unraveling it would require intelligence and courage. His love for Maria, the promise of justice, and the search for truth were the pillars that kept him steady, propelling him forward on his painful journey. The magnate, whose name was Arthur, felt the weight of that nascent truth like an anchor in his chest. With each passing day, the mask of normalcy he wore became heavier. He needed a way to act on the parrot's clue, cabin, far away, without alerting Helena. The mansion, with its echoing corridors and heavy silences, seemed to observe his every move. He decided he needed help, but whom could he trust? The idea of involving strangers was risky, especially if Helena was as calculating as he was beginning to suspect. His thoughts turned to the family's old gardener, Mr. Elias, a man of few words but unshakable loyalty, who had retired a few years ago and lived on a small property on the outskirts of town. Elias knew the estate like the back of his hand and, more importantly, was discreet. That afternoon, Arthur invented an excuse for Helena about an urgent business meeting out of town. Her smile was a little forced, and her eyes, for a brief instant, seemed to scrutinize his soul. "Don't be long, darling. I miss you when you're away," she said, with a voice that sounded like honey, but now rang hollow to Arthur. He nodded, his heart heavy with duplicity. Upon arriving at Elias's house, Arthur felt a momentary relief. The old gardener received him with the same simplicity and respect as always. Sitting on the small porch, Arthur, his voice choked, began to narrate the strange story of the parrot and the words about Maria. Elias listened attentively, his wrinkled eyes reflecting a mix of shock and sadness. "Maria, such a pure light," Elias murmured, remembering the girl who used to run through the garden. Arthur explained the clue of the cabin and far away. Elias, with his vast experience in the region, pondered. "Mr. Arthur, there are many cabins on your family's lands, those that stretch beyond the forest. Some are old, used by hunters or for storing tools, but one in particular, well, it's very isolated near the old stream, almost forgotten. No one has been there for years." A new wave of hope and fear washed over Arthur. He felt a warmth in his chest, a stab of light in the darkness. "Elias, I need you to help me investigate, discreetly. No one can know." The old gardener nodded, his expression serious. "For little Maria, I will do whatever it takes, Mr. Arthur. She was always an angel." Back at the mansion, Arthur found Helena in the living room stroking the parrot, which was strangely silent. A shiver ran through Arthur. "Where were you, darling? The parrot was so quiet." "I missed its chatter," she said, with an enigmatic smile. Arthur felt the imminent danger. She was watching him, testing him. He knew that at any moment Helena's web of lies could tighten, and he needed to act fast. The isolated cabin, the hope of finding Maria, everything depended on his discretion and Elias's loyalty. The search, now with an ally, gained a new and dangerous chapter. Arthur felt a lump in his throat as he watched Helena, who was still stroking the parrot's feathers with a false tenderness. That gesture, once so innocent, now seemed laden with ulterior motives, as if she were trying to silence the sole witness to her cruelty. He forced a smile, his heart beating erratically. "I need to prepare for tomorrow, darling. The meeting will be long." Helena merely nodded, her eyes fixed on him for an instant that seemed an eternity, before shifting her gaze to the bird, which remained in a disturbing silence. The next morning, Arthur left with an empty briefcase and a mind full of worries. Instead of going to the city, he drove to Elias's property, feeling the urgency in every curve of the road. The old gardener was already waiting for him, with an old map of Arthur's vast estate spread on the rustic table. Elias pointed to an isolated spot in the heart of the forest bordering the family lands. "It's here, Mr. Arthur, the most remote cabin. The path is difficult, full of dense vegetation. No one would dare go there without a good reason." Arthur studied the map, Maria's image filling his mind. "We need to be extremely careful. Helena is perceptive. Any false move could alert her." Elias nodded, his voice low and firm. "I understand, sir. I suggest we leave at dawn before the sun is high. We'll use the old hunting paths, which are less visible." The plan was simple, but risky. With each step, Arthur felt the weight of the truth approaching. The following days were an agony of waiting and dissimulation. Arthur maintained his routine, attended meetings, but his mind was always on the cabin, on the possibility of Maria being there. Helena, in turn, seemed more attentive than ever. She questioned him about his schedule, about the details of his meetings, and her eyes seemed to search his soul for any hint of a secret. The parrot, at times, would let out a "cabin," "far away," or "bad mommy," always at moments that seemed calculated to increase the tension between them. One evening, during dinner, Helena casually remarked, "Darling, I've noticed Mr. Elias has been very busy lately. Is he all right? I thought he was retired." Arthur felt a shiver. She was watching Elias, too. "Oh, yes, Helena. He's helping me with some issues regarding the maintenance of the older lands." "Nothing much," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady, while his heart seemed to want to leap from his chest. The conversation shifted to pleasantries, but the seed of distrust had been planted even deeper. On the appointed day, Arthur woke before dawn, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He left a note for Helena, saying he was going for a morning run. He met Elias at the forest entrance, both dressed in dark, discreet clothes. The silence of the woods was heavy, broken only by the distant birdsong and the rustling of leaves beneath their feet. With each step through the dense vegetation, Arthur felt a mix of dread and an almost unbearable hope. The cabin was getting closer, and with it, the possibility of a truth that could destroy everything he knew. He thought of Maria, her laughter, her childhood scent, and that image propelled him forward to unravel the mystery no matter the cost. The connection with his daughter, even if only in memory, was the force that guided him. With each step through the dense vegetation, Arthur felt a mix of dread and an almost unbearable hope. The cabin was getting closer, and with it, the possibility of a truth that could destroy everything he knew. He thought of Maria, her laughter, her childhood scent, and that image propelled him forward to unravel the mystery no matter the cost. The connection with his daughter, even if only in memory, was the force that guided him. The sun began to peep through the leaves, painting the forest with golden and greenish hues. The silence was profound, broken only by the rustling of leaves beneath Arthur's and Elias's feet. The air was damp and fresh, laden with the scent of earth and wildlife. Arthur felt his heart quicken with every meter, a mix of anxiety and renewed courage. Elias, ahead, moved with the familiarity of one who knows every tree, every stone of that place. His experienced eyes scrutinized the path, ensuring they left no visible traces. After a walk that seemed endless, Elias stopped abruptly, raising his hand. Arthur followed his gaze and, through a clearing in the dense foliage, spotted it. It was a rustic cabin with dark wood and a moss-covered roof, almost swallowed by the vegetation. It looked abandoned at first glance, but something about it caught Arthur's attention. There was a small window, and behind it the curtain seemed a little less dusty than the rest. A faint smoke, almost imperceptible, rose from the chimney. Elias gestured for Arthur to be silent. They approached with extreme caution, treading lightly, as if the ground could betray their presence. Arthur's heart pounded so loudly he feared the sound could be heard. As they got closer, the smell of burning wood and something else, an aroma of homemade food, confirmed their suspicions. The cabin was not empty. Arthur peered through the window, the glass fogged by dirt and time. His eyes strained to see through the gloom. And then he saw a simple room with a table and a few chairs, and on the table a small rag doll, a little worn, but unmistakable. It was Maria's favorite doll, the one she took everywhere, which he himself had bought for her on a trip. A wave of overwhelming emotion hit him, bringing tears to his eyes. The doll was there, like a beacon in the darkness of his pain. Elias, beside Arthur, had also seen. His eyes widened slightly, and he placed a hand on the magnate's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. There was no doubt. Maria was alive, and she was there, or had been there recently. The parrot's confirmation, once a fragile hope, now solidified into a painful and wonderful certainty. Arthur felt his legs give way, but determination kept him standing. His daughter was near. They retreated from the cabin with the same discretion with which they had approached. Arthur felt his body tremble, not from fear, but from contained fury and stifled joy. "She's alive, Elias. She's alive," Arthur whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Elias merely nodded, his eyes fixed on the cabin, an expression of deep seriousness on his wrinkled face. The way back was different. The tension was still there, but now it was tempered by a new urgency. Arthur needed to act. He needed a plan to rescue Maria and finally confront Helena. The image of the rag doll, the irrefutable proof, etched itself into his mind. He knew that the approaching battle would be the hardest of his life, but the promise of reuniting with his daughter was the driving force that propelled him. He would not fail. Justice for Maria and the truth for his family were now the only wealth that mattered. Back at the mansion, Arthur found Helena in the living room, sitting in her favorite armchair, a cup of tea in her hands. The parrot in its cage was agitated, swinging back and forth. "Darling, you took your time. Was the run long?" she asked, her tone casual, but her eyes fixed on every detail of his face. Arthur forced a smile, trying to hide the exhaustion and the torrent of emotions that flooded him. "Yes, a little longer than usual. Needed to clear my head. At that instant, the parrot let out a shrill cry, louder and clearer than ever. "Donna Rosa! Donna Rosa! Maria is with Donna Rosa!" Arthur froze. Donna Rosa! The name echoed in his mind. She was his mother's former governess, a trusted woman who had cared for him as a child, and whom he knew Helena had abruptly fired years ago, right after Maria's disappearance, citing staff reduction. A stab of clarity, cold and sharp, pierced Arthur. It wasn't just a cabin, it wasn't just far away. There was a name, a person, and that person was someone from his past, someone he trusted. Helena had orchestrated everything with calculating cruelty, using a trusted figure to keep Maria captive. The parrot's revelation, an unexpected turning point, transformed the search into a race against time with a clear target. Helena's mask was about to fall. The parrot's cry reverberated in the tense silence of the room. Helena, who until then had maintained a serene posture, let the teacup drop lightly onto the saucer, a delicate sound, but to Arthur it sounded like thunder. Her eyes, once calm, now displayed an icy glint, almost imperceptible, which she tried to disguise with a forced smile, her thin lips barely moving. "That chattering bird is getting stranger and stranger, isn't it, darling? It must be missing the forest," she commented, her voice a tone higher than normal as she hurried to stroke the parrot, almost as if trying to silence it with her palm. A gesture Arthur noticed with a shiver. Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine, the coldness in Helena's voice, the speed with which she tried to divert attention, the way her fingers tightened on the cage for an instant, all confirmed his worst suspicions. He needed to keep calm. He couldn't give her the pleasure of seeing his reaction, of giving her the advantage. He forced a smile, which felt like a heavy mask on his face. "Indeed, Helena, perhaps it's time to think about a vet for him," he replied, with a voice he barely recognized as his own, trying to sound indifferent, while his heart beat erratically, an orchestra of fury and despair in his chest. He excused himself, claiming extreme exhaustion and the need to prepare for the next day, and went up to the office. There, locked in, Arthur allowed the torrent of emotions to overwhelm him. Donna Rosa, the image of the old governess, with her gentle smile and her caring hands that cradled him in childhood, filled his mind. How could Helena be so cruel? Use such a good, loyal woman for her nefarious purposes? The pain of betrayal was almost as great as the overwhelming joy of knowing that Maria was alive and, possibly, well cared for by Donna Rosa, far from Helena's clutches. He felt his eyes well up, but the tears were quickly replaced by an iron determination. Anger bubbled in his chest, but he knew he needed to transform it into immediate and calculated action. There was no time for lamentations or for shock. He picked up the phone and dialed Elias's number, the only one he could fully trust in this labyrinth of lies. "Elias, I need you, now. It's urgent. The cabin isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The parrot spoke a name, Donna Rosa. The old gardener's voice on the other end of the line denoted concern and surprise. "Donna Rosa, the former governess. But she left so many years ago, Mr. Arthur, disappeared without a trace right after the incident with little Maria." "Exactly, Elias." And Helena abruptly fired her, citing staff reduction. "It's all part of her plan, a carefully woven web. We need to find her. She must know where Maria is or be with her, protecting her." Arthur felt the urgency in every word, his voice choked with contained emotion. "Any clue, Elias? Anything?" Elias, after a brief silence, responded with his usual firmness, his loyalty unshakable. "I understand, sir. Donna Rosa had a sister in the neighboring town, Mrs. Clara, a discreet woman but kind-hearted. Perhaps she knows something or has some contact. I will start investigating immediately. Discreetly. No one can suspect our movements. I will leave the mansion without raising suspicion." Arthur felt a momentary relief. a thread of hope in the darkness. With Elias by his side, the strength of his purpose grew stronger. He knew that Helena was a formidable adversary, cunning and unscrupulous, but his overwhelming love for Maria was an even greater, unbreakable force. With each passing minute, the image of his daughter, now with a clearer face in his mind, propelled him. He needed to be quick, astute, and act with the precision of a surgeon. The truth was unraveling, piece by piece, and he was determined to put all of them together, no matter how painful the process. Justice for Maria and unmasking the villain was his only mission. Helena's web of lies was about to break, and Arthur was ready for the final confrontation. He would not rest until he had Maria back in his arms and the truth revealed. Arthur would not rest until he had Maria back in his arms and the truth revealed. In the silence of the office, adrenaline still coursed through his veins, but now mixed with a sense of unshakable purpose. He looked at the clock. Elias would act at dawn, as always discreet and efficient. Arthur needed to maintain the facade, the mask of an oblivious husband, while his world crumbled and rebuilt itself in secret. The image of Helena, with her cold smile and her calculating eyes, haunted him. How could he have been so blind? His love for Maria, once a silent grief, was now a consuming fire, a promise of justice. The next morning, Arthur went down for breakfast with a calm he didn't feel. Helena was there, leafing through a newspaper, the parrot in its cage, strangely quiet. "Did you sleep well, darling?" she asked without looking up. "Yes, like an angel," Arthur replied, the bitter irony in his own voice, but imperceptible to her. He watched the back door where Elias, with his old tool bag, went out into the garden, as on any other day. No one would suspect. Elias, with a heavy heart but a focused mind, drove to the neighboring town. The path was familiar, but the mission made it different. He thought of Donna Rosa, the kind woman who always treated Maria with such affection. He couldn't believe she would willingly be Helena's accomplice. There was something more, a coercion, a secret. The hope that Donna Rosa was protecting Maria and not keeping her captive was what propelled him. He found Clara's house, a small, modest dwelling with a well-kept garden. Donna Rosa's sister opened the door, her eyes brimming with surprise at seeing Elias. Clara, a woman with white hair and a face marked by life, invited him in, offering him herbal tea. "Elias, what a surprise. It's been so long," she said, her voice choked. Elias, with his usual delicacy, explained the reason for his visit, mentioning Maria's name and the cabin. Clara's hands trembled, and she set the teacup on the table with a soft thud, her eyes filled with tears. "Donna Rosa, my sister. She asked me not to tell anyone, but I can't bear this pain anymore." She took a deep breath, wiping away a stubborn tear. "Helena threatened her, Elias. She said that if she didn't take Maria to the cabin and keep her there, away from everyone, she would harm our family who live in the countryside and take everything Donna Rosa owned. My sister had no choice. She loves Maria as if she were her own granddaughter and has done everything to protect her." Clara revealed that Donna Rosa, with a broken heart, had taken Maria to the remote cabin, a place Helena believed to be safe and isolated. She visited her sister and Maria every 2 weeks, bringing supplies and news from the outside world, always under the veiled surveillance of Helena's henchmen. "Maria is well, Elias, growing up full of life, but she misses her father. Donna Rosa always talks about him, tells stories, so she won't forget him." With each word, the weight of the truth became more palpable. Donna Rosa was a silent heroine, trapped in Helena's web. Elias felt a mix of relief and fury. Helena's cruelty was even greater than he imagined. He thanked Clara, promising that Arthur would bring justice. Back at the mansion, Elias found Arthur in the office. "Mr. Arthur, Donna Rosa is not a villain. She is a victim. Helena blackmailed her, threatening her family. She is protecting Maria in the cabin, keeping her alive and safe, but under constant surveillance. Arthur closed his eyes, a solitary tear rolling down his face. Maria was alive, and Donna Rosa was a heroine. The truth, however painful, brought with it a light of hope and a clear path to action. The final confrontation with Helena was inevitable, and Arthur was ready to fight for his daughter and for justice. Arthur felt his chest tighten with the revelation. Donna Rosa, a pillar of kindness in his life, carried the burden of unbearable pain to protect his little Maria. The fury against Helena burned intensely, but gratitude for Donna Rosa was a balm for his wounded soul. He opened his eyes, which shone with an iron determination. "Elias, we need a plan, without a trace, without risks for Maria or Donna Rosa. Helena is cunning and her henchmen are there. We cannot fail." Elias nodded, his wrinkled eyes reflecting the seriousness of the moment. "Mr. Arthur, the cabin is isolated, but Helena's men are not careless. They take turns, always vigilant. We need something to distract them, to give us a window of time. Maria and Donna Rosa are well, but surveillance is constant. We cannot risk a direct confrontation." Arthur began to pace back and forth in the office, his mind working at high speed. "What if we use Helena against herself? She is obsessed with control and her image. What would make her leave the mansion? Perhaps even go to the cabin, believing everything is under her control. We need to create a situation that forces her to move, to expose herself." "But how, sir?" Elias asked, confused. "Money, Elias. Helena loves money and power more than anything. If there's a threat to her vast fortune, she will move. If she believes she can solve it without me suspecting, she will act alone." Arthur stopped, looking at Elias with an intensity the gardener rarely saw. "I will simulate a severe financial crisis in one of my most important companies. Something that demands her presence, that makes her feel she needs to intervene to save the situation and, of course, her share of the inheritance." Elias's eyes widened. "A trap, sir. But what about the henchmen? What if she alerts them? That's where the subtlety comes in, Elias. The crisis will be so well orchestrated that it will seem like my mistake. She, in her arrogance, will think she can fix it without involving me, to show me her competence. The henchmen are there for Maria, not for Helena. If she goes to the cabin, it will be to check if her trump card is safe, perhaps even to give orders to Donna Rosa personally." Arthur felt a shiver, but the need to act was greater. "We need a moment when the surveillance at the cabin is weaker, or the henchmen are distracted. For that, Helena needs to be there, or nearby, focused on something else." Arthur picked up a map of the region. "While she is busy with the crisis, and perhaps a visit to the cabin, we will act. We need a discreet vehicle and an alternative path to reach Maria without being seen." Elias watched Arthur, admiring the magnate's coldness and intelligence. The man, once steeped in grief, had transformed into a determined strategist. "Mr. Arthur, I will do whatever it takes. I know the forest paths like the back of my hand. There's an old, almost forgotten trail that would lead us to the back of the cabin, away from the henchman's sight." Arthur smiled, a dark smile but full of hope. "Perfect, Elias. The truth is about to come out, and Maria will be back home." He felt a stab of anxiety, but the image of Maria, smiling and playing, was the force that propelled him. He would not fail. Justice for Donna Rosa, freedom for Maria, and the unmasking of Helena. Everything was at stake. The web of lies was about to break. The silence of the office, after the call with Elias, was heavy, but now laden with an unshakable purpose. Arthur knew that every move from now on would be a calculated step in a dangerous chess game. He needed to be the main actor in a convincing charade, and the stage was his own life, his own home. With hands trembling with adrenaline, but his mind sharper than ever, Arthur began to orchestrate the financial crisis. He spent the night awake, simulating complex reports, sending coded emails to his trusted accountants, those he knew were loyal only to him and the truth, instructing them to create a scenario of instability in one of his corporation's most valuable holdings. The idea was to plant seeds of panic, but in a way that seemed like his failure, an oversight that Helena, in her lust for power, would judge herself capable of correcting and capitalizing on. The next morning, Arthur went down for breakfast with deep, dark circles under his eyes, but an unshakable determination he could barely contain. Helena was already at the table, leafing through an economics newspaper, her eyes scanning the headlines with her usual eagerness, a slight smile of complacency on her lips. "Darling, it seems you didn't have a good night," she commented, without looking up from the paper, but with a tone Arthur recognized as an invitation to confession. Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples with a rehearsed gesture of weariness. "I had some problems with the company. Nothing serious, I hope, but one of our investments in Europe seems to be unstable. I need some time to understand it better." He tried to sound worried, but not alarmed, like a man who underestimated the gravity of the situation, a mistake Helena would love to exploit. Helena, who until then seemed distracted, looked up, a spark of dangerous and calculating interest in her eyes. "Unstable. Arthur, you know we cannot afford instability. Let me see the reports. Perhaps I can help identify the problem." Her voice was soft, almost seductive, but Arthur felt the trap closing around her. He hesitated, feigning reluctance, a slight frown. "I don't know, Helena. It's a complex matter, and I'd prefer to handle it alone. I don't want you to worry about details that might be tedious." The strategy worked perfectly. Arthur's refusal only fueled Helena's curiosity and desire for control, the certainty that there was something important he was trying to hide, and that she needed to discover. "Don't be silly, Arthur. We're a team, and I have a sharp eye for business, you know. Bring me the reports. I'll analyze them while you rest." There was a disguised glint of triumph in her eyes, the certainty that she was about to save the family fortune and, incidentally, reaffirm her indispensability and superiority. Meanwhile, Elias, with the discretion of a ghost, was already in motion. He had left the mansion before dawn with his old tool bag, as if for another day of routine garden work. But his destination was the forest, the forgotten trail that led to the cabin. He needed to reconfirm the path, check for natural obstacles or traps, and observe the movements of Helena's henchmen. Every leaf, every branch beneath his feet was memorized with the precision of a hunter. He slipped through the shadows, his experienced eyes mapping the terrain, seeking the safest point for approach. Arthur's urgency was his own, and the image of Maria, whom he had seen grow since infancy, was the inexhaustible fuel of his silent courage. Back at the mansion, Helena locked herself in the office, poring over the false reports Arthur had conveniently forgotten on his desk, feigning a calculated distraction. Arthur watched her from afar, his heart tight in his chest, a mix of pain and hope. He knew that the next phase of the plan depended on her reaction. If Helena believed that the crisis was real and that she could resolve it alone, her greed would lead her to act. And he was counting on that, on the predictability of her ambition. The web was set, and the spider, unknowingly, was about to fall into it. With each passing hour, the tension increased. The air of the mansion seemed denser, laden with expectations. Arthur felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but the promise of Maria in his arms was the force that kept him standing, unshakable. He would not fail. Justice was on its way. Helena, locked in the office, plunged into the reports Arthur had left, her voracious eyes devouring every number, every graph. At first, a smile of satisfaction curved her thin lips. The crisis was real, and Arthur, in his supposed naivety, seemed to have made a grave mistake. An opportunity, she thought, to prove her indispensability, to further consolidate her power over the family fortune. She ran her fingers across the tablet screen, calculating, planning. The idea that Arthur might have deceived her didn't even cross her mind. Her arrogance was a thick veil that prevented her from seeing the truth. Arthur, in his room, pretended to rest, but his ears were attentive to every movement downstairs. With each passing hour, the silence of Helena's office was a sign that the trap was working. He imagined her mind working, greed igniting, the desire for control propelling her. The weight was excruciating, but he knew that patience was his greatest ally now. The image of Maria, a face he barely remembered, but which was now vivid in his dreams, was the force that propelled him. Finally, in the late afternoon, Arthur heard the sound of the office door opening. Hasty footsteps ascended the stairs, and soon Helena was in his room, with an expression of false concern. "Arthur, darling, I've analyzed the reports. It's more serious than you think. This investment in Europe. We need to act quickly. I myself will go there tomorrow morning. I need to speak with the directors. Reverse this situation before the loss is greater." Her eyes shone with a cold determination, the adrenaline of the hunt in her veins. She wasn't going to Europe, he knew. She would go to check on her trump card in the cabin, perhaps even to give new orders to Donna Rosa, believing that the mansion would be empty and he distracted by the supposed crisis. Arthur, with a monumental effort, kept calm. "Are you sure, Helena? It's a long trip. I can go." He stood up, feigning an attempt to stop her, just to reinforce the idea that she was saving the situation. "No, Arthur, you're exhausted. Let me take care of it. I'm faster at resolving these things. I'll be back before you know it." She kissed his forehead, a cold and mechanical gesture, before leaving to organize her trip. As soon as the door closed, Arthur picked up the phone. "Elias," she bit the bait. "Tomorrow morning. She's traveling. This is our moment. Are you ready?" Elias's voice on the other end of the line was firm. "Ready, Mr. Arthur. The path is clear. The henchmen take turns. There's a 1-hour window at dawn when one leaves and the other hasn't arrived yet. It's the perfect moment." Arthur felt a shiver. Dawn, the hour of truth. He spent the night awake, rehearsing every detail of the plan. The backpack, with supplies, discreet clothes, the escape route. Every second was precious. In the car, before dawn, the silence was broken only by the engine and Arthur's heavy breathing. Elias drove with the skill of one who knew every curve, every shadow of the rural road. The tension was almost palpable. "Mr. Arthur, we're almost there. The trail begins right after that bend." They abandoned the car at a discreet spot and continued on foot. The forest, still shrouded in the pre-dawn gloom, seemed to breathe with them. Elias led the way, his steps light and experienced. Arthur followed him, his heart beating like a war drum. The smell of damp earth and dry leaves filled the air. With each step, Maria's image became clearer in his mind, a mix of anxiety and hope. Finally, Elias made a sign to stop. Through the dense foliage, Arthur could see the cabin, small, rustic, but with a faint smoke rising from the chimney. There was life there, and for a brief instant, he glimpsed a small figure playing near the window. Maria. His eyes welled up, but he restrained himself. A few meters away, one of the henchmen was sitting on a bench, his back to them. Distracted, the other, as Elias had predicted, was not in sight. It was now. The climax was imminent. Arthur took a deep breath, determination etched into every fiber of his being. He was ready to bring his daughter back home. Arthur felt a lump in his throat. The sight of Maria playing was a balm and an open wound that was beginning to heal. Elias, with an almost imperceptible nod, indicated the distracted henchman, who was observing the horizon with evident boredom. The gardener, with the silent agility of a feline, picked up a small stone and threw it in the opposite direction of the cabin, making a dry rustle in the dense foliage. The man turned, curious, his eyes fixed on the source of the sound, and Elias took advantage of the distraction to sneak past, closely followed by Arthur, who barely dared to breathe, every muscle tense with anticipation. They circled the cabin, reaching the back door, which Elias opened with silent mastery, almost as if time stood still. Inside, the air smelled of wood, earth, and comforting fresh bread. Maria, with her golden hair framing an angelic face and curious eyes, was sitting on the rustic floor, drawing with a piece of charcoal on crumpled paper. Donna Rosa, sitting in a rocking chair, knitted with slow movements, her face marked by worry and veiled loneliness. Seeing Arthur there, standing on the doorstep, Donna Rosa dropped her knitting, a muffled cry escaping her lips, her hands trembling. Maria looked up, and for an instant, a childlike, almost magical recognition shone in her gaze. "Daddy!" she whispered, her voice small and sweet, a sound Arthur never thought he would hear again, that resonated in his soul like the most beautiful melody. Arthur knelt immediately, arms open, tears streaming freely down his face, washing away years of pain and grief. Maria, hesitant for a second, ran to him, embracing him with the strength and innocence of a child finding her safe harbor. The scent of her, the softness of her hair, the feeling of her small, vibrant body against his, it was real, tangible, the living proof of a miracle. "My daughter, my Maria," he murmured, his voice choked with contained emotion, joy overflowing. Donna Rosa approached, her eyes brimming with relief and gratitude. "Mr. Arthur, I swear I did everything to protect her. Helena threatened me, said she would harm my family in the countryside. Maria is well. I raised her with all my affection, told her stories about you so she would never forget you." Arthur squeezed her hand firmly, infinite gratitude in his gaze. "I know, Donna Rosa. Elias told me everything. You are a true heroine, and your courage will be rewarded." Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of a car rapidly approaching broke the silence of the forest, getting closer and closer. Elias gave a warning sign, his eyes fixed on the front door. "Helena," he whispered, the word laden with tension. Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine, but Maria's presence in his arms gave him unshakable courage, a strength he didn't know he possessed. The front door burst open, and Helena entered, her voracious eyes sweeping the room with a mix of fury and surprise. She expected to find Donna Rosa and Maria, but never Arthur. Her triumphant smile, which she always wore, dissolved into a mask of shock and disbelief. "Arthur, what? What are you doing here? And Maria?" Arthur rose slowly, Maria still nestled in his arms, her small face hidden in his shoulder. His gaze at Helena was cold, cutting, but his voice firm and laden with an undeniable truth. "I came to get my daughter Helena, the daughter you stole from me, whom you kept captive for years, all for your greed and insatiable thirst for power." Helena staggered back, her face pale as wax, her lips trembling. "That's absurd. I don't know what you're talking about." "Maria died, Arthur. You know that." The lie was brazen, desperate, but the living, breathing presence of Maria in his arms was irrefutable proof, a truth that could not be denied. "Don't lie anymore, Helena. The web unraveled. The parrot told me the truth. Elias investigated tirelessly, and Donna Rosa confirmed every detail of your cruelty. You will be held accountable for every day of pain and suffering you caused us." Arthur's voice echoed in the small cabin, laden with an authority Helena had never witnessed in her husband. She tried to flee, a primitive instinct of survival. But Elias, with a quick and calculated movement, blocked the door, preventing her passage. The henchman, alerted by the noise and commotion, appeared at the entrance, but seeing Arthur with the child and the tense situation, they hesitated, confused, unsure whom to obey. Cornered, she watched her castle of lies and manipulations crumble before her eyes, her ambition reduced to dust. Arthur hugged Maria tighter, feeling the warmth of her small body, the promise of a future filled with love and truth. True wealth, he realized, was not in his vast fortune, but there, in his arms, in the reunion with his daughter. Justice finally had arrived, not with violence but with the unbreakable force of truth. He looked at Helena, her expression now a mix of defeat, rage, and despair. Your days of control and lies are over. Maria is safe now, and you will pay for everything. With Maria in his arms and Elias by his side, Arthur left the cabin, leaving behind the wreckage of a life of deceit and cruelty. The dawn light filtered through the trees, gilding the path to a new beginning, a future where family and truth would reign. Arthur held Maria tightly in his arms, his heart overflowing with a happiness he thought he would never feel again. The dawn light filtered through the trees, gilding the path to a new beginning, a future where family and truth would reign. Elias, with a discreet smile but full of emotion, opened the car door, and Arthur settled Maria in the back seat, feeling the warmth of her small hand in his. Donna Rosa, with tear-filled eyes but a countenance of peace, promised that she would soon join them at the mansion, after resolving details and ensuring that Helena's henchmen no longer posed a threat. Justice was beginning to be served. On the way back, Maria, exhausted by emotion, fell asleep in Arthur's lap. He watched her, every feature of her face, every soft breath, trying to absorb every detail that had been stolen from him for so many years. The pain of the past was still there, a deep scar, but now covered by a layer of hope and love. Elias drove in silence, respecting the sacred moment between father and daughter, but his eyes, every now and then, met Arthur's in the rearview mirror, sharing the joy and relief. Upon arriving at the mansion, the sun was already high, illuminating every corner of the imposing building. The parrot, which was in its cage in the living room, stirred upon seeing Arthur enter with Maria. "Maria, Maria is home! Bad Helena, bad Helena!" It squawked, flapping its wings with enthusiasm, as if also celebrating the reunion. Arthur smiled, a genuine and light smile, something he hadn't felt in a long time. That small feathered creature had been the catalyst for all truth, the messenger of hope. News of Maria's return and Helena's deception spread quickly among the few loyal staff of the mansion, who received the child with affection and admiration. Helena, in turn, was confronted by Arthur with the presence of lawyers and the police, who awaited her to investigate accusations of kidnapping and fraud. Without explicit violence, but with the force of law and truth, her empire of lies crumbled. She was taken away, her face once haughty, now marked by defeat and shame, her power and fortune, which she so coveted, now lost forever. Helena's fate would be a long and painful legal process, where she would face the consequences of her cruel choices, unmasked before the society she so valued. The days that followed were of adaptation and healing. Initially shy, Maria soon revealed herself to be a joyful and curious girl, filling the mansion with laughter and contagious energy. Arthur dedicated himself entirely to her, making up for lost time with stories, games, and tight hugs. He took her for walks in the gardens, showed her the parrot, which now repeated, "Maria, Daddy loves you," and introduced her to the old toys, which he had kept with the vain hope of one day recovering his daughter. Donna Rosa, after testifying and ensuring her safety, was invited to live in the mansion, becoming a maternal figure and a loving grandmother to Maria, her presence a balm for everyone. Elias, the faithful gardener, continued his work, but now with a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes, knowing that he had contributed to the justice and happiness of his family. Arthur, the magnate who one day was trapped in the golden web of his fortune and grief, found true wealth. Not in the numbers of his bank accounts, but in his daughter's smile, in the warmth of her embrace, in the honesty of his feelings. He learned that life, however painful, always offers the chance to start anew, to rebuild, to love. The mansion, once a place of silence and sadness, now resounded with the melody of life, hope, and unconditional love. The truth, however bitter the journey to unravel it, brought the sweetest of rewards. The family reunited. And so, under the watchful eye of the parrot, which occasionally let out a "truth sets you free," Arthur's family began a new and happy chapter, proving that love and justice always find their way. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion, once a sanctuary of silence and grief, blossomed with the sweet melody of life. Maria, with her inexhaustible energy and curiosity, explored every corner, her small feet echoing through the corridors, full of joy. Arthur watched her, a permanent smile on his lips, each laugh from his daughter a balm for his heart. He took her for walks in the gardens, showing her the flowers and the birds. The parrot, now an honorary member, repeated, "Maria, Daddy loves you, and truth sets you free," a constant reminder of the journey that brought them there. Donna Rosa, with her wisdom and affection, became the pillar of the household. Her presence was a warm embrace. Her stories, told in a soft voice, enchanted Maria and soothed Arthur's soul. She prepared the girl's favorite dishes, taught her lullabies, and helped her draw, her eyes shining with a grandmother's love. Elias, in turn, continued his work in the gardens, but now with a lighter step and a cheerful whistle. He watched Maria grow, strong and happy, feeling a silent pride. Each morning, he brought a fresh flower, a gesture of deep and loyal affection. Arthur had changed profoundly. Business meetings, once the center of his universe, were now fitted between Maria's playtime. He spent hours on the floor of his daughter's room, building blocks, reading fairy tales, and simply watching her. The sparkle in his eyes no longer came from stock prices, but from the genuine joy of being a father. He had delegated more responsibilities in the company, realizing that the true management of his life lay elsewhere. His fortune, once a golden burden, was now a means to ensure his daughter's well-being and happiness, no longer an end in itself. Helena, on the other hand, faced the consequences of her actions. The legal process was long and painful, exposing her lies and manipulations to the world. She had lost everything: reputation, freedom, and respect. The web she had woven had turned against her, trapping her in her own cruelty. Arthur, although he felt a vestige of sadness for the woman he once loved, knew that justice needed to be done. He felt no anger, only relief that Maria was safe and that the truth had prevailed. The mansion transformed into a true home, a refuge of love and laughter. Nights were filled with Arthur's stories for Maria, and mornings with their tight hugs, full of unconditional love. He learned that life, however much it tests us, always offers the chance to start anew, to rebuild, to love with renewed intensity. The human connection, the altruism of Elias and Donna Rosa, the overcoming of his own pain and grief, all this wove the new and vibrant tapestry of his existence. Maria, in his arms, was living proof that true wealth was not measured in material possessions, but in the invisible and unbreakable bonds of the heart. Arthur's family, now complete and united, looked to the future with hope and serenity, knowing that the truth, however painful the journey, would always bring the sweetest of rewards and lasting peace.